Here we are. You're back watching The Crave Show with JRuss and Chris, and we got a couple of guests with us tonight. I'm really excited. Happy that you guys are here. We got Tom Baker. Tom, how you doing?
Not too shabby. How you guys doing today?
Good, good. And we've got Mike Brewer with us. Mike, how are you? Yeah.
What's up,
So, man,
everybody?
I'm
I'm
so
doing
glad
great.
that you guys are here. JRuss, how's everything going where you're at?
Very well. Yeah, I'm out in Arizona. Tom and I are working a course together. He mentioned that Michael was also coming to town, and I thought we were all working the same course, but Michael's off on a different one, probably making better money in less hours. But um, but anyway, it's just we were all in town, and the three of us had talked in the past about getting together. These guys have had some. I mean, just colorful skydiving careers that are far from over and always doing cool projects. And um, yeah, both, in my opinion, safety-minded individuals in the sport. So I was
Very cool.
stoked
Yeah.
to be
Well,
able to get them on.
I don't know if you guys, Tom, Mike, if y'all know very much about Crave and what we've been trying to do. We started, or I started this a few years ago, and kind of started out as what an educational platform, kind of like masterclass, where we go around and just get with skydivers, people who are kind of at the top of their discipline, and we produce video courses, put together a bunch of content covering a certain discipline, wingsuiting, movement jumps, canopy flying, vertical flying. Um, and then we just make those courses available online. So we've got a platform with a library of content, and people can access that through a subscription-based model. And the hope is, the dream is that through the platform, we can provide knowledge and information, education from the best skydivers in the world to people all over the world, skydivers everywhere, that they can have access to this knowledge and this content. Kind of the way I think about it is, there's this foundational, this base of knowledge that represents, the skydiving community, kind of this knowledge that everyone kind of has, that gets passed along from, generation to generation, or skydiver generation to the next. And my hope is that through Crave, we can, number one, we can just raise that level of knowledge so that everyone has more information, more not, but good knowledge, good information. And then also that we give people access to content and training and instruction that helps them progress in specific areas that they want to progress in. Now it will never replace, in-person coaching, one-on-one, where you're with someone and they're jumping with you, they're watching your debriefing videos and all that. That's always, there's always a need for that. But hopefully we can provide this platform, this content that helps people move in that direction, and hopefully increases safety for everybody and increases the skill level for everybody, so we can all do more, have more fun, and be safer. So that's kind of how it started out, and we're still doing that. Still producing courses. We've got a course that's in post-production right now with Pete Allen. It's a really cool course. I'm excited for that one to come out. But in doing that, when we were filming the course with JRuss and Steph, I just really enjoyed getting to hang out with JRuss, just being around him. He's just a fun guy to be around. And so when I kind of had the idea of trying to start a podcast, I was like, he was one of the first people I thought about. So I called him and was like, hey, you want to do this? Like, what if we have a podcast and we just goof around and talk about skydiving, whatever? And he's like, yeah, let's do it, man. So that's what we started doing. But it's kind of morphed into, and I'm very thankful, it's morphed into us connecting with people that have specific knowledge or specific experiences, or just unique experiences, that can come on the show and share with us about things they've learned, things they've gone through. And for me, and it seems like for all of our viewers, because we've gotten a lot of positive feedback, that it's a really fun thing for everybody. Sometimes we get into kind of serious discussion. We're talking about things that are pretty serious and scary, safety oriented. Sometimes we're just goofing around talking about, weird whatever stuff. But so it's been really cool, and I'm really thankful to have you guys on, and that y'all are willing to give up your time and be here with us. So thank you.
So
It's awesome.
maybe for the people who are younger jumpers maybe and don't know you guys, would you guys mind giving just a little background, who you are, and kind of, I don't know, your bona fides or whatever you consider salient to share with people as far as who you are?
Sure.
Tom, you want to take it
So
first?
for those that don't know me, my name's Tom Baker, obviously, as mentioned before. Started jumping down in Florida shortly after getting a job at the original Sky Venture Orlando, back in early 2009, late 2008. Um, while I was down there going to school, got a job at the tunnel there. Then shortly after that, started jumping, I believe, right around August of 2009. And first year, didn't get too many jumps in, probably 30, 34 jumps. But by the end of my second year, I was well into doing over 1,000 jumps a year, had 4 canopies, 3 containers. I was in it working at the drop zone 7 days a week, working at the tunnel 6 nights a week. Um, from there, got really interested into free flying and specifically angle flying. Had a targeted goal of kind of getting on the vertical world record in 2012. And for me, one thing that was really important, especially starting in the tunnel, was breakoffs and tracking. So started seeking out a bunch of angle camps, learning how to angle fly with some of the boys down in Sebastian, traveling around, seeking out what they were doing, um, and kind of chasing that. Then started getting into a lot more aggressive free flying, getting into canopy piloting right around the same time as well. And yeah, not too
Yeah.
not too long
Yeah.
after that, started
Go.
traveling around, looking around like what were they doing in Europe? What are they doing in Australia? What are they doing on the West Coast? Learning that not only is there different ways to fly, there's different styles of flying. There's different ways of thinking, different ways of problem solving within this process. And so that turned into what were they doing around the world to what did they do. So that kind of transitioned into the better part of my coaching career where we started just traveling around, sharing that knowledge, sharing that information, and trying to keep people as safe as possible. Because at the end of the day, especially at this day and age, we're not really reinventing the wheel. We're just kind of sharpening that sword. So keeping people safe, make sure some of the old information that was learned back in the day isn't lost, and spreading it to some of the younger jumpers, newer generation, um, through traveling and through coaching. And then somewhere around 2015-ish, started getting into a little bit of wingsuiting, a little more different types of styles of flying as well. Dabble with competing here and there as well, competing all around, whether it be freestyle, free flying, freestyle canopy piloting, um, chasing records, and kind of creative projects and problem solving would be the latter part of the last 8 or 9 years, I guess you could say. It's kind of hard to sum it up into a short little phrase.
Cool. Thank you.
And on my end, I started jumping in 2012 when I was 19 years old, and I was bored at military school. And quickly that turned into me living in a tent behind the drop zone in Rayford at Paraclete, and commuting 3 days a week to college, and then spending the rest of my time like stealing PK's Wi-Fi to do my homework, and kind of just doing tandem video to pay the bills. And picked up a job at the wind tunnel in Paraclete, and kind of transitioned into more of a competitively driven career for a while. So I did most of the types of competition other than just like belly FS, and had a lot of fun with that for a long time. And then in 2020, I made a shift to move out to Europe for a few years and pursue the base jumping and speed flying and kind of like the parallel sports, parallel air sports to skydiving, and kind of really enjoyed that part of the experience a lot. Getting to see those different types of environments, and what you can learn from that, and then bringing those experiences back to my friends and to other people through film. So I've kind of always worked on on both sides of the coin. I really like to perform, and I also really like to film. So that's kind of been a big part of my two main driving forces over the last 10 or so years. And kind of going along with that, a big part of my motivation, probably since like 2017, maybe, it's really shifted towards facilitating like novel experiences, different types of stunts, and trying to add a little more value into what I was giving to and getting back from jumping, than just, trying to do another trick in free fall or something. And that's, I think, where me and Tom really started to jive a lot and do a lot of fun projects. We kind of seem to feed off of each other, and one of us will have a bad idea, and then the other one will start problem solving to figure out how to make it a safe idea. And then at the end of the 30-minute conversation, we realize it's a good idea. And then 24 to 36 hours later, we're kicking kegs out of caravans and doing all kinds of stuff. So yeah, that's kind of been the main focus and moving forward. Like those are my main goals. Just continuing to do stuff like that with the friends, and trying to push that envelope as safely and sustainably as possible using the experiences that I've had leading up to this, and just keep developing in that way.
So I got a question for you guys. Thinking about the past year, what if you were going to share like significant people, significant events, or times of growth, what would you share? Or you can answer the question, what's it like to be Tom Baker right now? What's it like to be Mike Brewer right now?
Oh, wow, that is a beautiful question. I think what it's like for Tom Baker right now, it's a very exciting time. I find, to start off with that question, I find all facets of this sport and this thing that we get to do, and I genuinely believe it is a privilege that we get to do this. I find all of it fascinating, but most importantly, I find the people and the conversations similar to this fascinating. I find the process of navigating how can we do this challenging thing in a safe manner? How can we, execute this objective and accomplish this task in a safe, and Mike hit it just a few minutes ago, sustainable fashion? Um, because that to me is what's most important. We kind of have this running joke of, hey, we can't wait to get old and be that guy by the bonfire telling the back in the day stories, right? Excuse me. And it is a privilege, and that
It's a
that is the
privilege.
goal, is to be that guy next to the bonfire one day, still doing stuff, not just kind of content where he's at, but still doing stuff, um, but doing these things in a sustainable fashion. So I think that's really where my mind's at, and where my head's at, and where Tom Baker's mind has been the last year or so, and for the last long period of time, is how do we execute these things? How do we maintain safety? How do we walk that line between stimulating and sketchy, or, sustainable and sketchy? And I think personally, one of the big differences is calculated risks versus unknown obstacles, right? At the end of the day, we're not bowling. We're not throwing a ball down a lane. You can, even on a simple AFF jump, on a simple tandem skydive, you can get hurt or you can get injured, but we want to see what other possibilities are out there in the world of skydiving, in the world of base jumping, in the world of paragliding, and any sort of aerial sports challenging our intellectual ways. So how do we do that? How do we do that in a sustainable fashion? How do we do that in a quantifiable fashion? And I think that difference is conversations. I think that difference is humility. I think that difference is being okay with saying, I made a mistake, I messed up, and how can we move forward from that, reflecting on it, learning, and getting better together, one jump at a time. So that's kind of where my head's been at.
Yeah.
And
Dude, I really like hearing people say, and you said that it's a privilege to get to
Yeah.
skydive. Like the joy and the fun, like it is so fun. And sometimes I do this myself, and I see other people doing it too. It gets so focused on trying to improve or trying to progress, trying to get better. trying to attain whatever the next thing is, whatever it is, that I forget that I'm like, I'm getting to jump out of an airplane. This is
Yeah.
so awesome. Like, and just have fun, like enjoy myself. And when I'm around other people who are doing that, it helps me, it like brings me back to earth and helps
Yeah.
me like just have fun, and that's why I got into the sport, because it's so fun. So I'm always thankful to hear people say those types of things, because it reminds me like, yes, that's exactly right. It's a privilege. It's so enjoyable. So what's it like to be Mike Brewer right now?
Well, Tom finished off his version talking about like learning from mistakes and sustainability. And I think if you're going to ask about what was my last year like, you've hit me at a very opportune time. Last year I had a really, really, really serious accident speed flying in April of last year, and so the entire last year has been focused on recovery and recentering and thinking about kind of how I want to move forward from that in a way that makes me better than I was before the crash. And I think it's been a big learning experience in that regard. So it's cool having a traumatic experience like that, and then basically finding myself more focused and more driven than I ever have been before for a lot of reasons. But also trying to, like, none of the dreams changed, none of the goals changed, but really kind of rethinking the approach and trying to make sure that I survive to enjoy these dreams, and that I don't sacrifice my health later in life in the pursuit of these dreams. So it's yeah, it's very poignant, kind of the question
So
that you
can I
asked.
ask, more focused and more driven? What do you mean by that, or why? Like, how did that? That's an interesting thing for you to say. I think after an accident, why did it make you more focused, more driven? How did that come about?
Well, I think everything that we do is inherently, I would say it's objectively pointless. And it's enjoyable for a lot of that reason, but like it's hard to argue that there's much of a human or existential application for jumping out of or off of anything. I think we can all just agree on
I
that.
just want to
So
think about that for a second.
when you when you almost sacrifice your life for something that is objectively pointless, you start having to look at
Hmm.
what the subjective worth is of that. And I've had at least half of a year where I wasn't in the air and where I was barely moving, and I was thinking about, I had nothing else to think about, right? So other than just focusing on getting better, I spent a lot of time thinking about what do these sports bring me? How do I want to interact with these sports and give back? And what type of example do I want to set if I get the privilege to continue doing these sports? Because that was up in the air for a while too, if I was going to be able to fly again and at what level. And luckily, the answer was like top notch for both of those. But yeah, just having that time to refocus and really think about what you're doing and why. That pretty much, yeah, that gives you a lot of drive when you find those answers. You don't have to crash off a mountain in order to reach those. You just got to sit around and think a
Yeah,
little bit.
it's cool.
But if you hadn't crashed off the mountain, would you have taken the time to sit around and think about it?
you know, I think it accelerated questions that I already had. Um, I think a part of me moving to Europe was a bit of soul searching. One part was because the access to those types of terrain and those types of activities is unmatched in America for sure. But the other half of that is like I was just looking for the next challenge, and things had gotten kind of cruisy and easy for me back home, and so I went looking for a different challenge, and I found one. But if you're constantly reaching out for something more difficult or more challenging, it's probably a signal that you should be thinking like, why what am I looking for, and what do I want to get out of this. And I think obviously crashing and hurting myself gave me a little bit more incentive to really start
So what
answering those
were some of
questions
those
to
answers?
myself. Um, well, it's an ongoing process, but the main thing is I enjoy testing my limits and pushing myself to be the best version of myself. So I used to think competitive skydiving or any type of competitive activity was about being the best in that particular activity, whether it's, against yourself or against other people. And kind of realized through this experience that it's less about being the best in that activity and more using that activity to whittle you down to the best version of yourself. Like you're pushing yourself through a lot of interesting emotions, interesting experiences, anxiety, fear, pain, all the good things too, of course. But uh, I've noticed it's a vessel for me to exercise the best version of myself, and I don't know a really great outlet for me to do it in any other way. I think that's probably
Hmm.
the deepest rooted one.
I would venture to guess there's a lot of skydivers that could at least relate um, on some level to that for sure. I mean, I can um,
Sure.
like because I've asked myself sometimes like why do I like have this drive or this need to do these types of things, from the time I was little, like why do I always, it's like I had to jump off that cliff. I had to do whatever it was. Like felt like I couldn't, if I didn't do it, I don't know. It's like, so maybe that may not be exactly what you're saying, but as you were speaking, it rang true to me at least a little bit.
I think it'll be true in a lot of different ways for
Yeah.
different people, for sure.
So, but one of the reasons that I thought about having these guys on was that they have had some super interesting projects, and although somebody said, might have been Michael, we're not reinventing the wheel, we're just kind of sharpening that sword. I don't know that that's 100% true. And I mean, maybe not reinventing the wheel, but certainly putting a couple different spokes on the hub, and just kind of a different pathway to doing some really interesting things. Um, and so if you guys don't mind, we can start anywhere you like. I know the two projects that we talked about in the past, one was, for lack of a better way to describe it, and I'm sure you guys will do better, using an old oil rigged platform as a landing pad for helicopter jumps out in the middle of the ocean. And a very interesting access to what is it, base jumping or skydiving or both? I'm not really sure. Um, and then if we could at some point also touch on what sounded like it might end up being a new discipline within skydiving, as far as an interesting and perhaps novel way to be flying your parachutes. So I know that you guys know more about all of those things than I do. Or if there's some other, maybe, I mean, you guys have done lots of stuff that I'm not aware of, so there might be even more. But those are the two that when I was talking to Tom and Michael at our last course, and
Yeah.
both of those sounded pretty cool. So if you don't mind, let's hear a little bit about those.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tom, if you want to start chatting about
Yeah.
frying pan, I can actually share a
So I
video.
started getting curious under campies, like I said, right around like 2011, 2012, the high performance side of things started to become attractive, even though I told myself I would never swoop. I was that guy as well. Um, whether it be getting creative, trying to invent new freestyle tricks and things that we could cross-reference from freestyle motocross, bringing it over to skydiving, or kind of like you were just saying, adding another spoke to the wheel. Kind of piggybacking off of what Mike was saying as well, just a creative outlet. Getting a creative outlet and having something inside of you, but um, not really knowing how to express it. The frying pan tower was such a beautiful way to express it. So the frying pan tower, what that is actually, oops, sorry, I didn't see that. The frying pan tower, what that actually is, it's a decommissioned Coast Guard tower, 34 miles off the coast of North Carolina. It is there to warn ships, or was there to warn ships of the shallow waters that are only 45 feet deep, 15 meters deep. But surprisingly enough, it's that shallow, 50K out in the middle of the ocean, 34 miles out in the middle of the ocean. And a friend of ours had sent this to me on Instagram or some social media platform, and I was like, "Oh, that looks cool," and ended up kind of just getting a little hard-headed and a little excited and researching who had owned this thing. Come to find this gentleman named Richard, and mustered up the courage to call him up, and I said, "Hey, my name's Tom, and I think your tower out in the middle of the ocean is pretty cool, and I'd like to skydive onto it." And he said, "Sure, that sounds cool. When do you want to do it?" I'm like, there was a learning moment in that time. Be prepared for yes. So, oh, be prepared for yes. I'm like, let me get back to you. I kind of need to figure this out. So the team was easy, getting Mike on board. We have already done a few film projects, whether it be proper SEG projects or just shenanigans around the drop zone. Working with Mike was a no-brainer, and obviously fun jumping with my friends is some of the funnest things I like to do. And then the rest of the crew, getting that together was pretty straightforward as well. What was challenging was finding a helicopter pilot willing to fly 50 kilometers out in the middle of the ocean, then let us jump off of his helicopter onto this platform. And then, of course, or procuring support boats, dive safety, proper med safety, because the reality is, if anything was to happen while we were out there, it's on us. So we wanted to do it right. We wanted to make sure we did it proper and make sure that it was done in a fashion where we had all of our T's crossed and I's dotted. So we ended up, after some time and research, getting a helicopter pilot willing to fly us out there. Um, we had tried and attempted to execute this years prior before we got the helicopter, but we had unfortunately got weathered out and only got to base jump off the tower. A gentleman by the name of Pat Walker was able to base jump off the top of the tower. A few years later, if I backtrack a bit, a few years later, we were able to procure a helicopter, get out there, and we base jumped off the tower. We flew through the actual skeletal structure of the tower and then landed on the tower. So we kind of got a little trifecta out there. All the while, spearfishing, slacklining, hanging out with a gigabyte per second internet out in the middle of the ocean, shooting balls of fire out of shotguns, and just launching fireworks, and overall an amazing time with some really, really beautiful people out there.
Yeah, it's a super special place, and the jump almost takes the back seat from the experience overall. And I've got some video from this. If you would like, I can share my screen. We can do that. So let me just pull that up real quick. I had this already, and then all of a sudden it's not
But
ready.
so the tower itself, a little backstory on that
Actually,
while
I can
Mike
refresh
cues that
screen.
up. It's a 501c3. It's a nonprofit. It is a chunk of steel out in the middle of the ocean that this gentleman ended up getting on a government auction. He won it on a government auction, and his mission has been to preserve this thing for the next generation to appreciate. So he's just been out
How tall
there.
is it?
It is 87 feet from the helipad to water, depending on the tide levels.
Okay.
From the top of the actual lookout tower, it is 135 feet. Um, the helipad itself is just under 65, 70 feet by 70 feet.
So that's a good visual of the tower itself, and just kind of like the regular landings we were doing on it. We got to make a few jumps, and
Oh wow.
this is all just raw footage, kind of tidbit stuff.
Oh,
Sorry, Inception. Uh, and this is a kind of talking about technical activities. This is one jump that Tom did. getting to
Nice.
fly through the steel of the tower and then
That's great.
splashing into the
That's
ocean
cool.
with no land in
So
sight
he would,
anywhere.
the helicopter pilot would, you guys jumped out of the helicopter and then he would land on the helipad. You guys get
Correct.
back in and go again.
Correct. So what we
Okay.
would do is we'd have him wait until either all jumpers were in the water or everyone had their parachutes contained. They would kind of go away into that little tower, tuck away into the stairwell, and then he could safely land without blowing us off the tower.
Yeah. That's cool.
Uh,
That's super
it's
cool.
it was really neat, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Mike said, the jumping itself takes the back seat to the tower. It is a very special place, and the only thing you can really describe it is, you know, you're exposed, you're vulnerable. When you get out there, no one is coming, and there's such a beauty and a peace to it, and it's it's pretty amazing. Like on the logistics side, it's self-sustaining. There's enough wind generators on there to keep the thing powered up. There's enough solar panels out there to keep the lights on and the TVs running, the internet running. And then if all else fails, there's a generator. There are like six of them. There's a lot of generators. The kitchen itself is pretty rad, but you know, when you're out on that tower, you step off the helicopter and then, you know, it takes off to go get your friends on shore. Or if you go via boat, you can get a boat ride as well. And depending on the tide and depending on the winds, it might be an hour and a half or it might be 5 hours and a lot of rough seas. And you know, when one of those two vessels or vehicles leave, it's just you. It's pretty cool.
I think it's important to add that before being on the frying pan tower, Tom had never been on a boat, much less 40 miles in the middle of the ocean, 90 feet off the water, basically the size of like
Yeah.
a small house
So
space to live on.
What are the dimensions
claustrophobia
of
and
the,
whatnot.
do you remember the dimensions of the
Yeah.
actual pad?
So the helipad is just under 71 feet. I
Yes.
think it's like 65, 71 feet. The by 71 feet. So it's a pretty pretty reasonable sized place to land. Bigger than a pea pit,
It's bigger than
you
a
know.
pea pit. Um, you're always dealing with, well, you'd call them coastal winds if you're on the coast, but I guess these are just ocean winds. So there's nothing to inhibit the airflow. So it's always windy. It's always a little bit technical. And yeah, the other dimension, I think it's 138 feet tall
Hmm.
to the mast of the lighthouse, and then like 90
Hmm.
feet,
Yep.
depending on the tide, to the water itself from the deck of the helipad. So kind of makes for a challenging target when you're coming into land because you're landing 100 feet above any other references. You can't just like see the horizon coming up and be like, oh yeah, I think I'm doing pretty well. You're kind of landing on just
Hmm.
this floating object in the middle of the
And
air.
the owner,
It's
I
cool.
mean, I'm assuming y'all showed him some of these videos, or was he out there, or what was he like excited? Did he enjoy it? What was he like?
He was beyond excited. Richard is a beautifully eclectic man. He's quite a character and got lots of personality. So now there is a board that takes care of the tower, and he's kind of the director of maintenance there and lets them take care of all the other stuff. But he was out there with us, fully supporting us, cheering us on. Made sure there was cold beer once we landed. Definitely made sure we had cold beer once we landed. But I mean, he kind of just did Richard things. He gave us the keys to his castle and said, "Have fun, be safe, don't hurt yourselves, and let me know if you need anything." You know, I mean, he had a lot of his own projects that he was working on within the tower itself. As you can imagine, one man managing that out in the middle of the ocean is quite a handful of work. So as he's going away, working away, we were doing our thing, kind of planning and preparing. And kind of speaking of planning and preparing, that place gets a bit of slack tide as well. So depending on the tide itself, those currents can be 5, 10 knots. So you may be landing into the wind, but if you over or undershoot, if you are upstream of the tower, you could absolutely drift into the tower itself, kind of adding another layer of complexity which side of the tower is your out, which side of the tower do you want to land on. But Richard made sure to give us all that beta, give us the full ins and outs of the tower, show us all the cool little secret dungeons and nooks and crannies of the place. And he's man, that place is him, and he is that place.
That's cool.
Yeah, he called it his adult tree house. I think it's just it seemed like he wanted something to pour some energy into, and he managed to score it on a government auction in the middle of the ocean. And yeah, it's a playground for him, and he definitely was very
So is there
kind
like
to
living
invite us
quarters out
onto
there?
it.
Man,
Totally. There's it's got room for more than a dozen people easily. It's basically the when you looked at the video, the thickness of the tower, like everything that isn't the helipad is essentially like either a maintenance shop or living quarters or a kitchen. And you can imagine like the kitchen and whatnot isn't that large actually. So I think we had like 12 people on the tower, and there wasn't any issue with that.
So
I think there were
did
still
y'all
like 3
spend the night,
rooms.
stay out there for a
So
few days, or
oh yeah,
what'd you do? Oh, dude.
yeah.
Tom, you were
yeah,
there
we
for a
spent
while, weren't you?
Not as long as we would like to be. So, like, to put it in perspective, if we go back to the Coast Guard side of things, they needed a full operating crew to be able to sustain life out there. So there's over 8 bedrooms, 16 beds, showers, running water. The helipad itself collects rainwater. It's got over 20,000 gallons of fresh water collected, and then he's got his own I forget what sort of water filtration system that's super awesome and epic. Um, it's like Mike said, it's got its own maintenance shop. Coming back to it only being 45 feet deep of water, well, it's the only shade structure in that area. So as far as the ecosystem and the pattern of life, there is unlimited fishing there. In 30 minutes, we caught enough food for our crew of 12 people for just under a week.
Okay,
You know
so
what I
where
mean?
do I on Airbnb? What do I search for for this thing? What's
Yeah,
So
what is it called?
that's
yeah,
you can
Dude, talk about what a beautiful retreat. Like just go
yeah,
and
right.
yeah,
yep,
the more you guys talk about it, I'm forgetting about the
um,
skydiving. I'm just like, dude, this is such an awesome play. Like you guys are so lucky. You made a phone call.
yeah,
Like you had the courage to make a phone call and say, "Hey,
yeah,
can we do this?" Yeah,
yeah,
dude, so awesome. That's awesome.
yeah. For all the younger skydivers, be ready for yes.
well,
That's
I
what I
think
would
you
say.
just you're ready for yes. Chris, I think you hit on something really poignant there, where you said you've basically like forgotten about the skydiving, and I think that is the coolest thing that skydiving has been able to give to me was
Mm.
experiences that were cooler than skydiving, right? Like once you do a few thousand jumps, they're all kind of the same. You know, they're cool, but it's about where you go with them. And yeah, I think that's when me and Tom were talking about what really gets us driven in the sport, like that's it. And I think also since we been talking about the tower for a while, I believe if you go
Yeah,
to fptower.org, you can apply to be a volunteer. Essentially, you pay for your helicopter flight out there and for some food, and you can stay out there for a few days. You don't have to have any specific skills. Just be willing to
yeah,
do a little bit of labor and enjoy the experience. So
yeah.
it's kind of like volunteer
Wow.
work,
So yeah, I'm looking at their
but
website.
pretty cool
So cool, man.
experience in and of
And I
itself.
think if
Yeah,
you check out
fptower.org.
Yeah.
yeah. Explore.org has live feeds. So very often it's the most shark infested water on the East Coast as well. So that's kind of another caveat, more so than New Smyrna Beach. Um, so a lot of scuba divers, a lot of fishermen, a lot of people go out there and just check it out because it is neat. Um, I don't know if you have your own helicopter, you can get out there. I don't believe they offer helicopter charters out there. I don't think they ever did. But boat charters for sure, they can get you out there.
So when y'all were fishing, what kind of fish were y'all catching?
Edible fish.
Edible, the
Uh,
kind you eat.
yeah. Sea
Ah, there
bass.
was the ginger
If
fish.
A lot of
if that guy in the
a
corner
lot
is
of sea
sea
There
bass,
was
and
a
bass,
ginger fish.
someone caught a ginger fish.
ginger fish.
I don't know what it was.
Yeah, we didn't hook Tom in the mouth.
It
There's an
was it
actual
was red
fish.
looking. We didn't get any sharks, which was good. We didn't get any barracuda. There's a lot of barracudas there. There are a lot. Um, But they get a lot of different stuff out there. Stuff that people that actually know about fish could tell you about that I don't remember.
That's
Yeah,
cool,
we were
man.
just hungry,
That's super
Yeah,
cool.
so edible
Really cool.
edible was good enough.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
But yeah. So it's projects like that. It's I think Mike said it, and to kind of piggyback off of it, it's projects like that. It's jumps that are challenging. Maybe even making a simple jump look beautiful in an artistic and creative manner. But I think one thing for me, the thing that I enjoy most about skydiving is the people and the raw honesty and the pureness that you get with the people that are around it, you know? It's one of the most beautiful things about skydiving is it's welcoming of everybody. It doesn't matter who you are or what you do. You can have someone who lives in a tent next to someone rocking up in a G5 and like, hey man, want to get on this 15-minute call together? You're like, absolutely, let's go, let's rage. And there is something absolutely beautiful about that where it doesn't matter who you are or what you do. Everyone just wants a little bit of free fall or a little bit of canopy time. But taking that even a step further, things like this or things that interest me are those in which that demand your attention. Because like Mike said, after a few thousand jumps, it's everyone goes through waves, but you can get content, and even more dangerously, you can get complacent. And being content, I view, is very, very beautiful, and it's okay. Like being content, being happy with what you got, it's a great place to be. But being complacent is absolutely dangerous. And being complacent is a very unattractive place to be. And also, like Mike said, what are you doing and why are you doing it if you're in a place of complacency? So to make a long story long, things like this, they demand your focus, they demand your attention, and more importantly, they demand you to be present in the moment with the people around you. So because they demand your presence and they demand you to be in the moment, I would say that, kind of going back to one of your other questions, is really freaking attractive about this stuff.
Hmm. Hey, could we just kind of riff on that for a second? That idea of the difference between complacency and contentment. And
Yeah.
just, I think that would be really helpful for me. Like, what does it look like? How do they look different? Like, how do I, if I'm at the drop zone, what do I see in myself that's contentment? What do I see in myself that's complacency? Like I think that's a really helpful thing to think through. I mean, and that's what we were talking about earlier. Like sometimes you just got to stop and put in the effort to think through something. Um, have you, I've never
I think
articulated those two differences. I don't think, not that I remember.
I think I think someone who's content is someone who doesn't feel a driving need to uh, reach the next level, hit an objective, hit a target. They are fully satisfied doing what they're doing right then. So um, the difference that complacency would add in is that someone who's content can be fully satisfied with doing the same jump over and over again for a while, but their heads up on that jump every single time. Every single time they're doing a gear check. Every single time they're thinking about what the winds are, what everyone else on the load is doing, or whatever type of jump it is. Whatever factors are required to keep that person safe. Whereas someone who's complacent may or may not be content with what they're doing, but also have the added factor of just being a bit lazy about those factors. I mean, kind of something you've done 1,000 times, you don't have to think about it anymore. You just stop thinking about it, and then all of a sudden, things are just running on processes that are unchecked. And I can't tell you how many times recently I've done a gear check, did the entire gear check, and I couldn't tell you the second I was done with the gear check, couldn't tell you anything that
Mm-hmm.
I saw in my rig. Like it just all looked normal, so I didn't even think about it. And then because of that, I go back and do another gear check because I want to actually be able to remember what those things looked like. Like things like that. It's just so easy to become complacent, and yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
they're mutually exclusive.
I think
But
when I feel myself being more content, like in a little bit healthier place of contentment, it's like I don't feel that strong urge to prove myself as much, you know? Sometimes I'm got that like that pride. I want to prove myself. I want to show either to myself or to others. But when I really get content, it's like, no, I'm just happy to get to join in, you know?
Yeah, I think that desire to prove yourself can be a factor that lays on top of some of the important things, right? So it's not exactly complacency, but it's definitely contributing to it because your focus is in the wrong place. And I kind of want to backtrack a bit and say that I don't think contentment requires you to be absolutely happy with the place you are. I think you can be still trying to progress, but you're content with how that journey is going, and you're not focusing on the wrong
Yeah, that's good.
things.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, Canopy Project.
Hmm.
I guess I did have a
All
question
right.
about the
Yeah.
platform. Uh, do you guys know around how many jumps did you guys make? Like, and were they all? It sounded like you were doing potentially some base jumps from there, and also some regular jumping out of, well, helicopter jumps aren't regular, but
Yep.
skydiving. Uh, how high can the helicopter get you up, and how many jumps did you do, and how many base jumps, and how much cleaning of your parachute was required, and
Anybody looking for a canopy? No.
Yeah.
Advanced gear.
yeah.
A little bit
Lightly
salty.
used, only some rust stains.
So formally, there are two base jumps
Wow.
off that tower with parachutes. People have high dived off that thing without a parachute,
No
and
way.
yeah, but with a parachute, Pat Walker was the first to send it, and then Dante, what's Dante's last name? Wardlaw? Dante Wardlaw actually took
Dante
it a step
Wardlaw.
further and went from the railing from the helipad. So Pat went from 135 feet, and then Dante went from right around 87, 90 feet into the water, and actually was able to grab his toggle before he hit the water too. So we did.
So sorry to interrupt, but I'm not a base jumper, and there's probably some people who are also not a base jumper. But it was my loose, very loose, feeling that I think 110, 120 feet was like a kind of a minimum number for a base jump.
Mike, you want to hit that?
Is it,
I think people are doing. Yeah, I was gonna say I think people have done like
To
70-ish to
dirt.
flat,
To dirt.
um, but it it starts. It certainly starts to become, like what is your definition of a base jump and what is your definition of a good landing at some point. I mean, I think the people doing 70 to dirt were standing it up as well, but we're talking about like you're not unstowing your toggles and you're basically just
Well,
kind of like hitting
how is
some
the
rears right
how is
before
their
the feet
exit
hit the
different? I mean,
ground.
like, is their canopy actually packed up like normal, or is it out for a 70 foot? I mean,
Well, I think, I don't know how exactly those were done, but yeah, you're absolutely not free falling for sure. And at the very shortest,
hmm.
you're doing probably a top skin assist. So, like, basically someone holding your pack job above your rig.
And
Um,
Okay.
And to
or
back
or
them
or
up,
a
I mean,
PCA.
hey, if at a world level you can crash land and be on the top of a podium for a swoop competition, if you can have a heavy heel or maybe take a knee on a 75-foot base jump, sick.
More power to you.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm gonna throw in that I'm not the expert on those super low jumps, so I don't know exactly how those were done. I just want that caveat in there.
and I really feel obligated to say, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but because we are trying to
yeah,
spread good information, that on a 70-foot base jump, if anything, and I mean literally anything goes wrong, you die, or you're in
it,
serious trouble. And so I just want to fairly
yeah,
put that out there, that when it's that low, and you're not
yeah.
into water, you're into dirt, as you said, like your margins are super
And that
super
was
tight.
one of the challenges. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Well, and I think I was just gonna say, I think that really hits the meat of what you guys are kind of leaning toward talking about on this podcast. Is we're talking about all these things, and I would never say don't do it, especially if it's something that I've done. But I think it's extremely important to note the technicality of these things and the fact that no one is going out there and doing these things sustainably, uh, just winging it. Like all of it is layers and layers and layers and years and years and years of experience and thought, like really active thought, really planning out the logistics and planning out all the minor details. You're never going to eliminate the element of risk. That's impossible. I mean, that's impossible in skydiving, which is probably the safest of all the activities we've talked about, especially hanging out with Richard. But I think eliminating as much risk as possible is something that you can't ignore when you're talking about these things. And we'd be happy to talk to you about some of what we went through for jumps like the Frying Pan Tower or any of the other projects that we've done, to kind of like look at those risks, mitigate everything, and I think it's important to show people the work, in some cases months or years of work that goes into one single project to make sure that you can pull it off like a professional and not pull it off like, you know, a dude who's just trying to get Instagram views and then winds up in the hospital.
So I think that for me, just because, you know, we go an hour and a half, I think it might be worth it to just point out that there was months of preparation that went into this, and you guys are calculating safety factors as sort of as responsibly as you can. You guys are actually just having this conversation kind of reminds me of years ago talking with Vince and Fred when they were doing some amazing projects, but so sometimes the behind the scenes stuff's got lost on people, and they didn't understand like how long it took to plan these things out. And it's a little bit ironic to say that, because as you said, risk cannot be completely eliminated, and Vince did go in on a pretty fucking epic project, sadly. But I think for the scope of what we're doing here, I hope it's enough to say that you guys aren't just finding a platform and sending it, that you are taking the time to plan it in the right way, especially because I do want to get onto the canopy stuff, and we're already at 53 minutes. So
I'll
Sorry,
chat.
that's okay. This is exactly what it was supposed to be.
I just
go
want
ahead, Chris.
to ask us: is it fair to say that also part of that planning is not the official? I mean, obviously the official actual planning, but the years of build up to those, like starting with smaller, like little shenanigans or smaller little things that you're like, oh, yeah, wow, that was crazy. I didn't realize that was dangerous. And you learn from that. And then you're like, okay, next time we do something like that, we need to talk about it more first. And so you slowly learn like, hey, we got to actually like think this stuff through, man. You know, like, is it fair to say that that's part of the growth too, is that you build up to those types of things?
I think I would take it even a step further back, and more importantly, learning from other people's mistakes, you know?
Mm.
The cliche being the little brother, learn from your older brother's mistakes and successes. It's it's a very fine line to dwell on the negativity of mistakes, but reflect, learn, and push forward and progress forward, right? And I do appreciate you bringing that up, JRuss, because you know we often downplay a lot of things, but the reality is there was so much that went into the planning and preparation of this, you know. Richard being someone who doesn't know skydiving at all, and to openly trust us for a project like this. And we could have gone out there without water safety. We could have gone out there without flotation devices. We could have gone out there without, you know, proper medical support and someone who's highly experienced in, you know, trauma response and even dive safety on top of that, if I didn't mention it. And we could have done all of those things, and could it have gone right? Maybe. Um, but being able to utilize those and being able to walk up to the project and say without a single doubt in our mind that we have done everything that we can articulate, think through, and everything in our powers, not even just budget restrictions, but everything in our powers to make this as safe as an experience as possible without that overbearing the actual joy of the project, without the safety blocking us from the goal and the end state in mind. Obviously there is a tipping point, but just like Mike mentioned earlier, inherently what we're doing is potentially dangerous. So what is the allotted amount of acceptable risk? Who's willing to accept said risk? And then how does that decision get made? Because this isn't just one person saying, oh, we're going to go base jump off this tower. It's like, well, this is a collective effort. This is a collective thing where if I was to hit the structure flying through it, if someone was to drown jumping off of it, it's not just on that person. It affects a whole team of people now. And jumping off of it, it's not just on that person. It affects a whole team of people now. And learning from previous mistakes in smaller environments, like you're talking about, or smaller projects, was I inaccurate on a jump? And how can I be accurate? How consistent am I with unknown winds? How consistent am I in accuracy with known winds? Um, have I ever tried to land on a vertical obstacle that has a really disorientating depth of field in regards to the foreground, and finding creative ways to cross train, finding creative ways to land on a specific rock, maybe out in Moab, and see what that's like landing on the edge of a talus, or finding creative ways to simulate and superimpose this tower over a certain portion of your drop zone and not just your same beer line and pea pit. um, I think is very important. So I think to answer that question, absolutely, taking smaller little basic things and applying them to these more challenging tasks, at the end of the day, nothing we did, and I know this is going to sound stupid, but nothing we did was crazy and challenging. Everything we did had everything to do with mastering the basics and applying those basic fundamentals and principles that you learn from jump one,
I'm going to kind of add
just in
a
a more
couple quick
challenging and
things
fun
on that that's going
environment.
to segue into the flocking stuff. So I promise, JRuss. But yeah, Tom was reminding me that I think when you're thinking about any of these projects, super important is you're always operating at like maybe 70% of what you're capable of. You're never like hoping to nail it at 90% every time, because you won't. It's JRuss knows this. Like, you're only as good as your worst day of training, right? Like, your competition average is not going to just drastically increase or anything. So any of these performance type activities, you want to be operating with like a pretty healthy margin of error. And that margin of error changes as you get better, as gear gets better, as your knowledge gets better, and as your team gets better, which goes on to the second point of it's not just learning the smaller mistakes and smaller projects, but it's also learning your team and finding people that you trust and you know how they're going to behave in certain situations, and so you can apply them better in those situations, to their strengths. And then yeah, lastly, you can't do anything if you can't visualize it first. Like, if you are thinking about doing a trick or a stunt or something and you can't just sit there with your eyes closed, or better yet open, and just navigate the whole thing in your head to successful completion, promise you it's not going to work. So as we were kind of like going through those early years of flock and flow and like the dynamic canopy flocking and building off of what some of the other exclusive teams had already been doing, it was cool to see how that teamwork operated, how people were using those like minor lessons to really push that discipline into what it's become now, because dynamic flocking is getting super, super cool. And the video that I have pulled up that I can kind of show you to explain the discipline is the first test event that those guys ever threw. And everything, the coolest stuff we did in this event is stuff that we do on like day 1 or 2 with like some of the lower level groups in the current events. And that was only 3 years ago. So
Uh, yeah, so just about 4 years
so
ago,
you
we
want me to
started,
throw up the video,
formally
JRuss?
started together in
Cool.
2019.
I'm going to share my screen. It's going to get crazy for a second.
And so,
Wait, I think
So while Mike's putting that up, for those of you that don't know, what JRuss is excited to share is about 4 years ago, two teammates of mine and I, we started a company called Momentum. And we all like to get creative. We all like to fly parachutes. And, for myself, it was a lot of solo freestyle. My first flocking experience would have been in 2012. And we didn't really have any formal structure, formal way of knowing what to do other than YouTube University. So met with Max Manow and Matt Leonard, and we started developing a curriculum and a program so that everyone can do it. Obviously, there's a few exclusive teams out there that do and produce some amazing content, even before I started skydiving. But what we wanted to do and our goal was to be able to share and raise the level of knowledge for everyone and make that level of knowledge and that ability for people to flock together in a kind of crawl, walk, run environment where everyday people and everyday jumpers can do some freaking rad shit. Like, yeah. So without further ado, yeah, get it.
That's what I'm talking about. Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys. What you talking about?
All young men with suits and ties, just sitting in the crowd smoking big cigars. I hope you're ready for what's coming now.
Sorry, Max. I think that was probably enough to give the general gist.
So to keep kind of going off of what JRuss was saying about this potentially being a new discipline, this a new thing. I view canopy flocking, Flight One and some of the founding members, Jay Maletsky, Shannon Pilcher, Ian Bobo, JC, and JT, a bunch of other guys. Those guys really pioneered formal, clean cut canopy flocking and skydiving the way I see it. Those guys really pushed what was nothing into something. And kind of, if you look at like Fly for Life or even further back going to Babylon over in Europe, did for angle flying and tracking, what Olav Zipser and Tim Porter and some of those guys did for angle flying and tracking, and showing how a bunch of friends can fly together without having to hold hands. But you can have someone with 200 jumps or someone with 20,000 jumps share the sky together, be on the same skydive together. The group isn't dependent on one person being there or not being there. And now you have all of these homies flying together on the same jump at an extreme range of skill levels. And it isn't the cliche, oh, well, Carl went low again. I guess we're not going to turn a point. It's more you know what? Maybe Richard wasn't there. Suck less next time. You'll catch up. And so now you have what was a beautiful format with angle flying and tracking translated into canopy piloting. And then even a step further, just the engineering of the curriculum, the engineering of just basic canopy flying. This is what your toggles do. This is what your front risers do. This is what rear risers do. And then adding to that, body position. A lot of people, especially within the last, maybe prior to 10 years ago, didn't really think about body position while canopy piloting. But the reality is, if we're going 50 to 80 miles an hour airspeed, that body position's massive. So we developed this curriculum and showed it to these people and got jumpers with 200 jumps, 250 jumps, sometimes even less, flying these formations like you just saw. Now, granted, those specific formations you saw were more experienced jumpers on smaller cross-brace canopies, but we had people with 250 jumps executing, accomplishing the exact same thing in sometimes even a cleaner fashion at such a young experience level, because we're able to share and raise that education of jumpers. So now we're getting groups of 5, 6 people with lower experience safely to build next to each other. We're getting groups of 7, 8 people safely to do flybys, crisscrosses, changing formations, working towards team landings and, you know,
Hey,
flying
Michael,
canopy
as
relative
you guys
work
are
without
talking,
having to
do you have
dock or get
anything
tangled in lines,
like
hopefully.
just raw footage that's a little bit less production, but just maybe something that your inside view that shows a little bit like longer or sustained view at the builds and kind of what you're doing. Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe.
I'll try to dig some of that up. I'll go on a little hunt real quick.
So, so while Mike searches for that, a little more in depth in the discipline itself. Like I said, I feel like people have been trying to fly parachutes next to each other for a long time. So I guess that's where I say I don't feel like we're we're inventing the wheel. Or maybe like you said, adding a spoke to it or putting structured curriculum to it, and really enforcing safety and holding each other and ourselves as leaders in the industry accountable for these things. At the end of the day, if you said you were turning left and I tell you you didn't turn left and you tell me you did, and we watch this little video and it shows you didn't turn left, guess what? Cool video, done, cool, moving forward. Um, but we kind of took and utilized those basic fundamentals, applied it into a 3 to 5 day camp format, and really focusing on team building, really focusing on getting the flyers to trust each other, flyers to work together. Because unless you are on a competitive team and start developing hundreds, if not thousands, of jumps together, you show up to the drop zone, you come to a boarding area, you don't know someone. There's going to be an understandable amount of precaution before you start pushing to the next level or your next level, I think more importantly. Um, and within these formats, we're doing, depending on the environment, depending on the jumps, we're doing 3 to 6 jumps a day, not as high reps as per se a free fall training day. However, 3 to 5 jumps, 3 to 6 jumps of 6 minutes under canopy each jump, you're getting 30, 35 minutes of full demanding, intense flying per day, versus call it 9 minutes in free fall or 16 minutes in free fall if you're banging out 20 jumps, right? So the amount of time that it takes and it demands your attention is great in this environment. Pushing that over the course of those 3 to 5 days, by day 2, day 3, I almost view it as like we're going to trick you into doing amazing things you never knew you could do. But the reality is, going back to just those basics, if each individual, most importantly, focuses on their own job and their own slot, and if they do their own job well, once everyone on that team trusts each other, and once everyone on that team works together individually doing their own job within respect of
All
each other,
right.
yeah,
I've
they get to do some
kind
pretty
of,
rad
yeah,
shit.
here we go. I've got one for you. Give me about
So
10
hey, Mike, while you're getting that, I
seconds.
know people are going to ask because they do every time. Are these videos available on YouTube or somewhere that people can go later on and watch them? Because people always ask.
Yeah, they should be all available at least on the Momentum Facebook page. Momentum
Okay,
Flight,
so if
the
you're
Facebook
watching
page.
this episode, you can
JRuss.
go the Momentum Facebook page. Is there a YouTube channel for
Correct.
Flock and Flow or for Momentum or for you guys? Okay.
Most of the YouTube content we let each individual videographer release. So some of it will be underneath Buzz, some of it will be underneath Momentums, some of it will be underneath Jehonas.
Cool.
But we can make sure once this podcast is posted, we'll
Momentumflight.com.
have a
Cool.
direct link for that. All of our content can definitely be found
Here's
on
this is
momentumflight.com
more
though.
or less. It's a longer clip, and it'll show you more of I
Whose
think
view is
what
this, Mike?
JRuss was looking for.
Basically
This
from
is still
top to
from one of the
bottom,
videos.
continuing the same jump without having to key any of the maneuvers, and it was incredible to see where the level is at now and what's possible with a group like that.
One of the unique things that
So that'll basically, it's kind of like the top end of one jump, and there's still so much more of that jump. We bring, I think there are 2 or 3 more big moves on that particular jump, and then we fly the formation in the more advanced camp all the way to the ground. So people are flying in that trail and do a big 6 or 8 way team. I think just 6 ways, yeah. Team 90s into the landing area. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Did that kind of show what you were looking for, JRuss? You're muted. Still muted. Yeah, we didn't want to hear you talk anyway.
You're still muted.
You're still muted.
There we go. It's 2 clicks. Yeah, you'd be surprised
muted,
how many times I click
back.
this thing when I'm playing video games, but apparently I can't do it
2
when
clicks.
we're talking on the
Give me 2.
podcast. And just to be fair, and the people that know me out there, you know, a lot of times older people struggle with technology. So what can I say? I was just, yes, that was exactly what I was looking for. And then I kind of, I was on a different screen here looking at your Facebook page and just some of the videos that are available. With some pretty amazing backdrops, something that I can only assume is Europe, and some mountain flying and camps that you guys are offering, and members of the team. So just, yeah, a lot of good information that's obviously posted here. And yes, the video is exactly what I was hoping for. Just a little, you know, the dynamic nature of the canopy flocking that you're doing.
Very cool.
Cool. I mean, we just want to keep moving, keep flowing. We want to stay in motion. The static jumps are fun. The static jumps are neat and stimulating in a larger formation environment. But you know, there's nothing that can replace a 2-way. And if nothing can replace those 2 ways where you can push as hard as possible, you can go full power the entire jump. The third outside video on a 2-way is not a 2-way. But if we can start bringing some of that flavor, some of that energy, some of that continuous motion, I think like Max was describing in that jump, being able to create these dynamic maneuvers and execute them in continuous motion without having to pause, without having to stop. You know, that's kind of the dessert. That's the cherry on the top with some of these jumps. And where
I would have to imagine
once
for
we
the
get through
people
the
who are
fundamentals
listening to
and the
this
basics,
and thinking about
now let's go
how to
rip.
spend their time and money within the sport of skydiving, that the cool nature of what you guys are doing sort of at the finished product is everything is sort of based on improving canopy skills. And so for people that, you know, at really any skill level, mine or somebody with 50 jumps, or they're going to come away from your camps with a whole lot better understanding of the performance of their wing, what they can do with it, what they can't do with it. And in addition to having a really good time, you guys are probably like Mr. Miyagi here with the wax on, wax off of teaching people how to do stuff, and then, hey, let's go put this into real time. Super cool shit. So I hope that that comes through that to the people who might be interested in your camps.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to throw out there that this is one of the disciplines where, you know, like people,
Absolutely.
I think when it comes to canopy piloting, it's always that trend right now where people are like trying to downsize to get to a canopy that they can swoop on, which is totally backwards. And I want to make sure that this discipline doesn't fall into that. In this case, learning to flock during the float camps, because there's the flow and then there's float, and the float is the lower wing loading, like a more accessible camp for the younger jumpers. Everything is actually a touch more difficult at that wing loading. So learning to do it right now it's producing already, just across the 4 years that we've been doing these things, has produced like some pretty epic skill levels immediately transitioning over when they get onto the faster wings. So it's it's one of those things where it's not like wait till later till you have the skills to go do the cool stuff with the boys. It's do it right now, because you're going to get excellent at it in a harder configuration, and then you're going to get to enjoy it more when you get to the higher wing loadings. And I don't think there's much difference between what the groups are doing, with the exception of like barrel rolls, like that you can't really do on the lower wing loading canopies. Like the rest of the jumps are, because I shoot video for both camps, like the jumps are equally intense for me, no matter which group I'm with. This year we were ping ponging between the lower wing loading group and the higher wing loading group, and it didn't matter which jump I was on. Like, it was full on the whole time, super cool. So there's no reason to wait until later.
That's cool.
Absolutely. And I think kind of touching on that as well, one thing that's important to me is, especially for anybody out there listening, or trying to figure it out through YouTube University, or do something that you've seen someone else do on some sort of media platform, and you're like, oh, we can do that. Obviously, accessibility is a thing we want to expand on, and we are expanding quite well. There's going to be more camps throughout the country, and substantially more international camps. But for those of you that are maybe at a drop zone or don't have the accessibility, just start out with a goal, start out with something simple, and make a plan. Discuss it with your SMTA, discuss it with more experienced jumpers. Would we love you to come to our camps, and would we love to jump with you at our camps? Absolutely. But we also understand that's not the reality for everybody. So if you are going to do stuff like this, realize that there are precautions that need to be taken, and 99% of problems within skydiving can always be backtraced to, well, we didn't really have a plan.
Can you guys
start that out?
Give a plug real quick.
Reverse engineer it.
You mentioned a couple already,
Keep
but
it
where
safe,
can people find
not too
information
spicy.
For what you guys are doing, and how they can get connected with you, how they can be a part of a camp or instruction or something?
All of our camps will be listed and posted on the website, momentumflight.com, and then links to the camps themselves. We will ask for references and everything. We're not just going to throw a bunch of random people in with a bunch of other random people.
Cool.
So as we do that, we'll probably reach out and talk to you as well.
Cool. And I
I
just typed in Momentum Skydiving on Facebook. And I definitely found you guys. The first posting I saw was about a leadership course, and you guys have sort of a white circle with a blue triangular shape inside of it, and the Momentum as your logo, the name Momentum in there, and then also the momentumflight.com is linked there as well. So hopefully people can. And I put momentumflight.com into the chat, Chris. So
cool.
hopefully,
Awesome.
Yeah, so people can keep up with you guys.
Perfect. If possible, definitely go to the website. That'll have the latest and greatest information regarding whether camps are in Europe or South America, or obviously within the U.S. as well. And like you mentioned before, JRuss, some of the more scenic backdrops and more aesthetic places. Next year, I believe we have a list. We will be going out towards Norway. We will be probably going back to Slovenia as well, Switzerland for sure, and then sprinkling camps throughout the U.S., whether it be the Midwest near Chicago, Elsinore, Southern California, and then obviously some of our flagship locations, Paraclete XP, and then maybe a few drop zones in Florida
Dallas
as well.
Or Houston, or
and we're coming out towards you, Chris. We're coming out towards Spaceland. I believe we went out there this summer, and
right, I need
we
to put it on my calendar.
Houston.
I need to get my references together.
So we should be back out there next year as well. Yeah. We get you there. We get you a slot.
Don't let him in. Don't let him in.
I don't know. It looks like you might know one person or two.
All right. Well, man, I mean, JRuss, You've
Yeah, I mean, we got to come up with something
man.
new though, because we didn't do that.
You've done it again. You wasted another perfectly good hour listening to the Crave Show.
Yeah.
He hates it every time.
It's just it's a great hour. It's not wasting it.
Well,
We're
I
doing
hope
great.
it was. I hope
Yeah.
if you listened, I hope that you benefit from. I know it's good for me, man. I really appreciate you guys being here, and it is not a
Doing
waste
great.
at all. You guys are doing a lot of fun stuff. I'm sure you've got way more stories than a little bit we heard
Absolutely.
tonight. But
No.
thank y'all for joining us. Thanks, guys. Thanks for what you're doing for the skydiving community, for your attitudes and your mindset, the way that you guys are going about being who you're being and what you're trying to do. It's really awesome. We need all that we can get. And if you're watching, go check out their website, momentumflight.com. Check out the camps that they've got going on, and
Absolutely.
get out there in the sky. It's a privilege. It's a privilege. We get to jump out of airplanes and have fun, enjoy yourself, have fun with your friends, be safe, crave, do more, be better. Thanks, you guys.
Cool.
And
It is.
blue skies.